This is Tim.
Mulele.
And this is Critiquing Comics. Welcome to Critiquing Comics. This is Tim with Mulele in Tokyo on Skype. How are you?
I'm good. And you?
I'm doing reasonably well.
Excellent.
Continuing to not notice much difference in how busy I am, no matter how bad COVID-19 gets. Of course, we're out of the state of emergency in Tokyo now, at least for the moment, unless and until the number of daily cases in Tokyo gets worse again.
Well, it is actually up to double digits again, and
right.
we're hitting the mid-20s right now. But the Tokyo government, according to my girlfriend, has assured us that we're going to handle it without shutting down the city again. However, we're still not allowed to travel outside of the prefecture. Not like you can't go for work or something to another prefecture, but you can't basically vacation there. No hotels, none of that stuff.
I see.
At least not till maybe the middle or end of this month, but we'll see how it goes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so this time we are talking about a comic that I found on Webtoon called Adventures of God. Credited to two guys named Teo, T-E-O. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce the vowel there. Teo and Corey. This started in November 2016 and is still going on. It's basically a gag strip. There is a little bit of continuity through it, but it's in the tradition of newspaper comics, although a little bit longer per episode than a newspaper comic, but it's that tradition. And as the name suggests that it could be a little bit irreverent, not as much as like Holy Fuck that we talked about before. That was very irreverent.
Oh yeah.
This comic, it's kind of just sweet sometimes. Its take on God and Jesus is, kind of. Some people who would be really uptight about religion might still be a little put off by it, but yeah, it's not so irreverent. Just that God is kind of a funny guy and kind of grumpy, and yeah. And I don't know, it's kind of a comic or a funny, humorous art style. And some of the strips I thought were really hilarious, but I don't know, as I kept reading it, I feel like it became kind of less biting as it went on. And even that, he's kind of, they have kind of built up their number of characters involved, but I started to feel like who the characters were was becoming a little bit less important somehow. Like the guy who is Satan, or they call him
Lucy,
yes, for Lucifer. I felt like he was becoming a little bit more mellow maybe than he had been before. So I kind of enjoyed the earliest strips better, but yeah, it's not a bad strip. And they've been, dealing with current events, and there certainly have been current events the past few months. That's made its way into the strip too, the pandemic and the recent protests and so forth. What did you think of this?
So the first page I liked quite a bit, but it was like, oh God, that's awful. But yeah, it's funny. I laughed. But after that, I really just didn't like the comic. I guess I'm one of those uptight guys. But basically, it comes down to my belief in God and the Bible. I'm not sure if you're familiar with my own views on the one true God. And
don't know that we've ever talked about it.
Well, yeah, my mother was brought up as a Protestant and very, very strict Protestant upbringing, and declared herself a Buddhist at 16, and then an atheist at 20. And I basically declared myself an agnostic at 16, which means I don't know what it is. I would say these days I'm kind of spiritual, but not really religious. So every time, but I mean, I still do have a little bit of my mother's atheistic animosity towards God and stories of God. So as I'm reading this, I'm just feeling, this guy's just an asshole. He has no care for anything that he does. Everything is just a gag. And all around him, people suffer, and he cares nothing for it.
Which character are you talking about?
God.
Oh, okay.
And some of them I thought, okay, I can see where the writer thought that this was clever, like the AA meetings where he gets to the third rule and it's like, give yourself up to a higher power or something like that. And he says, oh, problem solved. It's like, okay, yeah, sure. But at the same time, I kind of felt, no, this one's not for me. So a little clever at times. Sometimes they have something to say about society or about God, about bullshit in the Bible. But in general, I felt it didn't need to be about God. Some of the things they could have said without him being there. And so in general, I felt this one's not for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, now that you mentioned it, God, the character of God in the story is maybe not important enough for this strip to be called The Adventures of God, because sometimes, many of the strips focus on other characters. So it's kind of adventures going on around God rather than the adventures of God.
Yeah, and actually, God himself is not such a well-rounded, interesting character. And so it's a little bit of a one-note thing. I would have been more interested, and full disclosure, I got as far as episode 23. I was like, you know what? I'm out. They're building the Tower of Babel, and Lucy came up with the idea of the internet, which would disrupt their labors. And sure enough. Anyway, yeah, it's well drawn. It's competently written. I just don't think it's as clever as it needs to be for this topic. And you're right. It's not as biting as it could be.
Yeah, well, and I felt like it got kind of softer and sweeter as it went on, too.
Yeah.
You only read the beginning. You read the good strips.
Oh, those are the good strips.
I mean, I had a bunch of my favorites bookmarked, and most of them are like number 18, number 22, number 23.
Yeah. So, so as you said, that it began to involve some of the Corona stuff and recent events. I thought, okay, well that is kind of interesting. Maybe there is a kind of something there too. to really comment on. It's kind of a meaty. I mean, all this shit in 2020 is kind of meaty.
Yeah.
But if that's not the best part of this comic, then I would say no. Then they definitely missed something. But what pulled you to this comic to begin with?
Well, I don't know. I guess maybe because it had a religious theme and it was a comedy, I was wondering if it was something on a par with Holy Fuck that we talked about before.
Right, okay.
So that kind of got my curiosity, I guess. Plus, I don't know, I mean, my background with religion, my dad is a minister, or he's retired now. So I grew up with it around me. Never quite felt the need for it in my life, honestly. And I guess I've considered myself an agnostic also. But I don't know, kind of discussion of Christianity is interesting to me on more of an academic level. And I mean, I guess my feeling about Christianity, this is kind of off the topic of the comic, but has been, I think the message is good, but I started to feel like there was too much focus on the supernatural aspect of it, or the stories and everything. I mean, I felt like the message didn't get emphasized enough. And, you know, certainly we see how the kind of the wrong aspects or the misunderstood aspects of Christianity get emphasized by certain groups of people too, or it gets misused in a lot of ways, and that's, you know, always been true for most of its existence.
Okay, there was one thing that I was thinking of. There's like a few gags in here that seem a little anti-gay. And I don't know necessarily that the thinking of the author is that way, but there are a couple of lines in the Bible that seem a little homophobic, and they play with it a little bit at the beginning about this one guy who's a perfect Christian, but it turns out that he's gay, so he sends him to hell because those are the rules. And then Lucifer is like, "Hey, stop trying to set me up with people." It just seemed a little, yeah, okay, but do we really need to go there? But I guess for a gag strip like this, you're going to go everywhere.
Yeah.
And maybe the point is to be tasteless rather than, yeah.
I think that was one. I mean, there are hundreds of strips there now. I didn't read all of them, but I think I did see that one, and I guess I took it as sort of a commentary on the fact that there is the homophobia in the Bible, and not so much that the strip itself was homophobic. I mean, you know, Lucy is gay, and he got married in one of the strips.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's certainly some of the strips, you know, are very I took to be pretty liberal and in favor, you know, what do I want to say, accepting of various kinds of people.
Sure, but
So,
we're dealing with the ultimate good and the ultimate evil here, and in that sense, the ultimate evil is gay, but the ultimate good is not. And so it sets up kind of a weird question. Even if Lucy is a bit of a not such a bad character, he doesn't seem evil, but I mean, Lucifer, as it's represented to us through the Bible, is evil. And so, why not make God gay and Lucifer not be gay?
yeah.
I mean, it just seems kind of a little bit too much.
Yeah, well, and as I'm describing God in the strip, I feel like we've kind of already seen that take on God in other comedies.
Yeah.
It's not a very original take on God to have him be grumpy and not quite on the ball.
Yeah.
So yeah, that might have been a more original way to play it and still have it be humorous.
Well, it reminded me a little bit of Rick and Morty, where Rick basically is the God character here, same kind of drunk asshole who can do anything. Now, of course, you've seen Rick and Morty, right?
I haven't seen it at all. I know that it exists, but I don't know anything about it.
You're doing yourself a disfavor, but I would get on that and rectify it. But basically, in the story, and no spoilers for this, it's just the general ism of the thing. Rick travels interdimensionally, and so he will meet other versions of himself.
Okay,
and they're all just as obnoxious. But they and sometimes it gets deadly. But it's interesting some of the things that they do with the idea of meeting yourself, or knowing that all of the versions of you all travel to other dimensions, so they all kind of know each other, and some of them form collectives. And just how far that rabbit hole goes. They really do a lot with those concepts. This one starts out with this, but goes nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even a throwaway line from a Burroughs book that I remember reading as a kid does more with the concept of God than this. And it basically was, if God is omnipresent, then he can't actually do anything, because to actually do something presupposes a position in space. So it's basically an impasse, which means that the whole thing's a farce. This doesn't go that far, isn't that introspective into what it's trying to show you, and actually doesn't get beyond the first generation of jokes that it puts out. And I don't know, maybe by episode 400 and something, it starts to go there, but in the first 23, it did not.
Yeah, I feel like there's potential here that's being squandered. And the pencil started out a bit sharp and has gotten dull.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, as far as, how sharp the humor is, and how much they're doing with the concept, and maybe kind of how kind of imaginative they're being with it. I mean, they're trying to make statements about current events, and that's fine, but that doesn't really require God to be in your strip. So
yeah.
So yeah, I guess I liked it at first, and it got a little disappointing after a while.
Yeah. So I would say for this one, I can't really recommend it unless you're really down for simple gags based on monotheism.
Mm-hmm.
That's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rick and Morty is still better.
Okay.
Sorry.
Check the show notes for a link to Adventures of God on Webtoons. More with Mulele coming up. I'm continuing to republish classic episodes of Deconstructing Comics in reverse order, unlocked by our patrons' generous support. This week I'll republish number 53 from December 11th, 2006, in which Brandon and I discuss Mike Allred's Madman, Cosby and Alexander's Damnation, and Brian Michael Bendis and Ashley Wood's Hellspawn. Find the classic episodes on our Facebook and Twitter feeds by choosing the earliest months listed in the sidebar pull-down menu at deconstructingcomics.com, in publicly available posts on our Patreon page, or in the Patreon smartphone app. Classic episodes have been unlocked back to number 46, So, classic episode re-releases will stop in 7 weeks unless we meet our next Patreon goal. And you can help make our Fullmetal Alchemist podcast a reality as well. Check out all our goals and help us reach them at patreon.com/deconcomics. When you watched Batman as a kid, you enjoyed the colorful heroes and villains, the text sound effects on the screen, the thrill of watching a heroic crime fighter escaping from death traps and taking down bad guys. But the show was devised to interest adults, too. What did you miss as a kid? Sexual innuendo.
The penguin's too small for me.
Closeted gay characters.
I like that cape, Batman.
Freudian death traps.
Has the giant clam really swallowed Robin?
Police incompetence.
Bruce Wayne is a millionaire playboy. Hardly a secret identity for Batman.
Whether you're a kid or an adult, there's something to like about our favorite Caped Crusader. Tim and Paul dig for the deeper meanings under the Batmania every other Thursday. What's the podcast's name?
To the Batpoles. To the Batpoles. To the Batpoles.
So with all the recent events in the States, and I'm not talking about coronavirus, I think white people, many white people, white Americans in particular, are feeling like, we wish that we could do something to improve the situation and, break the systemic racism in the American system. And I mean, not only is that hard to figure out how to do it, but I don't even live in America. So I'm at that much more of a disadvantage. And I got to thinking, was there something that the podcast could do? But the thing is, I don't want it to come off as kind of pandering. Mm-hmm. A long time ago, someone who's been on the show a few times suggested doing an episode on gay comics creators. And I guess I kind of felt like, I don't want to feature somebody because they're gay. I want to feature them because they're a good comics creator.
Right.
And, there have been gay comics creators on Deconstructing Comics and African-American creators and so forth. Maybe not as many as I could feature their work. Mm-hmm. But, I don't want to feature them just because of their racial background too. I mean, I have to make sure that I'm finding, good creators whose work I want to recommend. It's just kind of hard to hunt those down, maybe. I'm wondering if you or our listeners have any suggestions about how we might approach this.
It's kind of hard to say exactly what to do here. I think everybody has to kind of come to their own understanding of what the issue is and how to approach it. My feeling is that there are a lot of Black creators out there, creators of color, who just don't get that much play. Mm-hmm. And without getting into the mess of the system is stacked against them or whatever it is, I've seen a lot of creators of color who just don't seem to be hitting that Marvel or DC mainstream. Maybe that's not where they want to go, or maybe they just can't get there. But a couple of years ago, there was an artist who decried the lack of diversity in Marvel and DC. One other artist, I forget who it was, stood up and said, it's not because we're racist. It's because you guys just don't work hard enough for the ability to make these great books that we make. We're excellent and you're not because you just don't work hard. We can't help it if we're excellent. And it was, in fact, quite a racist idea, I felt at the time. Mm-hmm. I can't remember the name of the artist who said that, but I just remember thinking, fuck this guy. And dismissed him from my life, absolutely. But it wasn't someone that I was following really closely anyway. But if and when you come across an artist that looks like they could use a boost in people's awareness of them, I guess I should say, give them a shout out, give them that boost as much as you can on your platform. But that's the whole point of the podcast that you do, not just with Deconstructing Comics, but also with what's the other one called that we do?
Critiquing Comics. This one.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, anyway, with Critiquing Comics, especially, is made to talk about up and coming artists, creatives, writers, whoever we can talk about. We look at the work, whatever it is, no matter what the level of the entry. We're looking more for amateur work rather than established professionals or people who've got mainstream things, and those come around every once in a while as well. But we do more or less wait for people to send us work in. So whoever sends in gets reviewed. We, as far as I understand, we haven't turned down anybody for a review.
No, I don't recall ever doing that.
Yeah, there's been some that were like, nah, don't like this comic for these reasons. But that's fine. That is the review.
Yeah.
Yes, we saw it, we read it, we didn't like it, next. Okay, yes, we saw it, we loved it, great, next. And that's what we do. So as far as this podcast goes, specifically Critiquing Comics, I don't know that there is much more we can do other than going out and actively pursuing artists to send their work into us.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of the people whose work we've talked about, we don't even know what they look like. We have no idea if if they're black, white, red, whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, before we started recording, you asked me about diversity on the podcast itself, and I had to actually remind you that there are a lot of people of color who do podcast with you, myself included. There's also Kumar and Kum.
And you mentioned Chris, and then I also remembered, I've forgotten his name now, but the basketball player that you and I talked to last year.
Well, he was more of a guest than actual.
But I'm including guests in, or particularly guests, I guess is what I'm talking about. I'd kind of forgotten about the staff of the show, yeah.
Well, I'm just talking about the staff of the show. The guests are a whole separate thing. But my point is, if you actually receive work from an artist of color, you absolutely review it. From anybody, you absolutely review it. And that's one of the things that I love about doing this show is that aspect of it. We're not here to talk about, who would win in a battle, Thor or Superman. I really don't give a fuck. But more to talk about, okay, what is this creative person doing? And where do they need help? And can we get them more attention?
And what, if anything, what could they be doing better? Or they're already doing everything great, or, Yeah. And online, there are directories of Black artists. I've seen a few. I'm in a few. And so as far as wanting to see more diverse people, if you're a listener of the podcast and you want to see them on our show, ask them to send something in, or you can send it in and let us know that this thing is cool, and we will review it that way as well. Sometimes we don't have enough things to review, so we just randomly pick something, like today's episode. We just randomly picked it, rather than that artist and writer sending it in to us. So absolutely, if a listener does send in and say, I would like to hear what you guys have to say about this one, then we'll review it, same as we do all of them. And if we have information to tag the artist in our
tweets and Instagrams about the review, then we'll do that too. But what else would you ask for? What else can be done?
Well, as I think about it now, I think in terms of both reviewers and guests, especially recently, I think more than on a racial basis, but we don't have very many women. There are no women among the quote unquote staff of the podcast, and it's been a while since a woman was even on as a guest. So that might be where I need to work harder.
Well, if you're recognizing that as a weak point in your podcast, then definitely do something about it. But all the women in my life are not interested in comics and have absolutely nothing to say about it. So
right.
I really don't know what to say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how we would get a regular. Staff is not the right word. But co-host of Deconstructing Comics. I'm not sure who we would recruit. I mean, the women I think of who I do know are into comics are probably too busy making comics to be on the show very often. So I kind of hesitate to ask some of them because I figure that they're way too busy. Like Irene, she's got day job and working on her comic, and she's got a lot on her plate. Yeah.
That's true. But I mean, still, if that's a place that needs to be checked or to be corrected, or not a place, but a thing about the podcast that needs to be rectified, then maybe that's the place to start. But as far as race goes, I'm not feeling any sort of bias for or against any particular race, because you've accepted everyone who's come to you and you've reviewed everything that has come to you. And the only other thing I would say you could do is if you specifically wanted to fixate on creators of color, then let's start putting in creators of color every couple of episodes. Okay, but then you're starting to actually make race a thing, and it's not like I'm talking about some sort of sorry, I'm losing my English again. What was that thing that they had to make sure that black people got into universities?
Affirmative action. Yeah,
it's not some sort of anti-affirmative action stance that I'm taking here. It's just a matter of people who are in your sphere. I mean, if anything, I'd say there's a lack of Japanese presence, considering that we're both living in Japan.
Well, yeah, that's been on my mind the whole life of the podcast, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about a number of manga, including Akira.
Yeah.
But yeah, there have not been very many Japanese guests. And the biggest problem there is language, because most of the Japanese comics creators I've met don't speak English.
Yeah. And sorry, go ahead.
I did once interview a creator in Japanese, translate the interview, and just put the text, or I guess I may have written an article based on it or something, but did it in writing rather than audio.
Yeah, you also interviewed Pink Lady, didn't you?
Yeah, that was quite a while ago. That was before the podcast.
Okay.
That write-up is on my other website I don't do much with it. TimYoungOnline.com has the Pink Lady interview on it.
Yeah. So in that sense, it is an American issue, and a lot of crazy stuff is happening right now. Some of it very, very interesting, because I like to see where they go with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we could be looking at a new paradigm with all the stuff that's coming. I don't know. A lot of it is cosmetic, but some of it is starting to lean towards fundamental change, like the Minneapolis Police Department. I understand the city council has voted to disband them and to reconstruct the thing in a new way, where the police are maybe not a catch-all for anything that happens in the city, which is a much more reasonable, much more responsible way of doing it. And I don't know, I would like to see that happen in a lot of cities, but I understand that people are scared. What are we going to do about the people who have guns? Well, the biggest number of people who seem to have guns, like actively outside on the streets, are police. And that is a problem, especially when you call a cop and you don't know which way it's going to go.
Yeah.
Either the person who called them dies, the person who is the problem dies, or someone in the area dies. You just don't know, and it shouldn't be a roll of the dice when you call a cop.
Well, yeah, I'm wondering if there have been any like graphic novels about police brutality, or about any of these issues. There must be something out there.
There is a comic called Black.
Okay.
It's about what if all of the superheroes, I mean, the idea of mutants was something to do with the color of your skin. So only black people could be superheroes. How does that shift race relations? And what does that do when you have a group of people who are trying to oppress and kind of keep them down, even though they're powered? I haven't read the comic, but I would be interested in reading it if you're down to read it too.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. It's kind of hard to Google, it sounds like, but
yeah,
Black comic.
I'll find it and I'll send you a link.
Okay.
But yeah, I would be down for reviewing that. But as far as improving the ratio of black creators to white creators, a lot of the time we don't know what the person looks like.
On Critiquing Comics, certainly, yeah.
Yeah, on Critiquing Comics especially. So, especially with Critiquing Comics, anybody who's out there listening to us, if you want to see that person of color get more traction somehow, and you think we can help, absolutely send their work to us, and we will review it, as we do all the books we review. This is not just for the creators to send in. And I think that would definitely help the ratio, especially if Tim, you're feeling that it's lacking somehow.
Yeah, for sure. And any up and coming creators, hook us up with their work so we can talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be the thing that breaks them into a long lasting career, but it'll be help in that direction. So definitely send some work our way.
Yeah. So if you'd like us to critique your own comic or some other up-and-coming creator's comic, send a PDF or a link to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages of it, hopefully more if we like it, and we'll critique it on the show. So any final words?
I don't know, Shazam.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I think that I feel like I should say more. One last thing. I'll just say this. Silence is deadly. And although the idea of see something, say something is a little bit rooted in police, it is not a bad idea. And it's not just about seeing bad things happen and reporting them to the police. It's about seeing anything that you want improved or accentuated or removed from your life, and talking about it and shining some light on it. So, yeah, for whatever it is, whether it's Black Lives Matter or representation in comics. If you see something you want different, say something. And at least we're listening.
Yeah. Yes. We are the comics industry here.
Yeah. And I think that's where I'll leave it before I say too much. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So thanks for listening. This is Tim.
I'm Mulele.
And this has been Critiquing Comics. Tell us what you think. Is Deconstructing Comics falling down on the job in terms of diversity? Also, we'd love to hear from you about your favorite up-and-coming creators of any race whose work we could talk about on Critiquing Comics. Write us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com or send us your own work. Our theme is from bensound.com. Next week on Deconstructing Comics, Paul and I talk about Moon Knight, the first volume of the epic collection books of his early adventures. Moon Knight was something special for us as we came of age in the 80s, but Doug Monk and Bill Sienkiewicz's great work on the title seems largely forgotten today. We're going to try to rectify that next week. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Critiquing Comics.